The sound was deafening, metal slamming on metal, alarms blaring, and the echo of men shouting behind thick steel doors. A red warning light flashed across the narrow hallway of Pelican Bay State Prison, California's most feared Supermax. Officers in riot gear stormed down the tier as smoke filled the air. Somewhere inside that chaos, a man named Raymond Cortez had done the unthinkable. He had escaped his cell in the Security Housing Unit, the SHU. No one had ever done that before. But the strangest part wasn't just that Razor got out. It was how he did it. No cameras had caught him moving. No one saw him tamper with the locks. Yet his cell door was wide open, and another inmate was missing too. The guards stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. One officer shouted, "How is that even possible?" Before anyone could answer, the lights went out. Total darkness. The prison went silent except for one sound, a single metallic click echoing through the corridor. Then a scream. It hadn't always been this way. When Raymond Cortez first arrived at Pelican Bay, he was already a legend in the California prison system. Convicted for armed robbery and multiple assaults, Razor was sent to the Supermax after a gang riot at Folsom left 2 men dead. At Pelican Bay, they said he'd be buried alive, locked alone for 23 hours a day in a gray concrete box the size of a parking space. The SHU was built for total control. No contact, no sunlight, no noise except the hum of air vents. Guards spoke through small metal grates, and prisoners communicated through tiny cracks in the walls by whispering. Everything was designed to break the human spirit. At first, Razor fought the system. He shouted, banged on doors, and tried to break the camera above his cell. But weeks turned into months, and he began to change. He stopped yelling. He stopped moving. He'd just sit there, staring at the wall. The guards thought the SHU had finally crushed him. Then strange things began happening. One night, a guard named Miller swore he saw Razor's reflection in the glass when Razor was supposed to be asleep. But the reflection was smiling while Razor himself wasn't. Another inmate reported hearing whispers through the vents, voices calling his name, even though the cells were soundproof. The warden brushed it off as paranoia. "The SHU messes with their heads," he said, but Miller couldn't sleep. Every night he'd hear faint tapping sounds, 3 short knocks, then a pause, then 3 again. Weeks later, during a routine check, Miller noticed something chilling. The bolts on Razor's cell door, each one made from reinforced steel, had been loosened from the inside. That night, Miller reported it to the control room. "We've got a problem in C block," he said into the radio. "Cell 214, something's not right." The officer on the other end laughed. "You mean Razor's cell? Relax, no one escapes the SHU." But before Miller could reply, the prison alarm blared, and Razor Cortez was gone. The guards swarmed the block, but Razor had vanished into thin air. No hole, no broken door, no tunnel, nothing. Just an open cell and a message scratched on the wall in tiny, uneven letters. "Now you see how Pelican Bay really works." As the warden stared at the message, his radio crackled again. "Sir," said a nervous voice, "we've got another problem. One of the officers is missing too." And then, from the end of the hallway, came that same metallic click. The emergency lights flickered, casting red shadows across the cold concrete. Officer Miller gripped his flashlight, breathing hard. "Who's there?" he shouted down the hall. No answer. Just that slow, deliberate click. Metal against metal. He took a few steps forward, every sound echoing like thunder in the silence. When the backup team arrived, they found the missing officer, Officer Daniels, lying unconscious behind a locked gate. His uniform was torn, his radio smashed. But the strangest part was his key ring. Every single key was missing, except one, the master key to C block. and on the floor beside him, drawn in chalk, was a small circle with a single line running through it, like a strange symbol. "Get him to medical," the warden barked, "and find Cortez now." But deep inside the SCHU, Razor Cortez was already 2 levels below, moving like he'd studied the place for years. He knew when the lights would flicker, which cameras had blind spots, and exactly when the guards rotated. The prison that was built to hold him had, somehow, taught him how to disappear. 2 days before his escape, Razor had been visited by Dr. Elaine Porter, a prison psychologist. She had been assigned to check on inmates showing signs of severe isolation distress. Razor was one of them. But when she entered the interview room, he greeted her with a calm smile. "You want to know what Pelican Bay does to people?" Razor asked. Dr. Porter nodded carefully. "That's right." He leaned forward, his eyes dark and steady. "It doesn't just lock us up, it studies us. Watches how we break. Every cell is an experiment, every camera, every microphone. It's not for safety, it's for research." Dr. Porter frowned. "That's not true, Raymond. These systems are only for monitoring." Razor smiled again. "Then why do the cameras move when no one's watching?" She didn't answer. She wrote a note in her file and left early that day. But that night, her office computer turned on by itself. The screen showed a live feed from the SHU, a camera that was supposed to be offline. And on that feed, she saw Razor staring directly at the lens, smiling. Now, 2 days later, he was gone, and no one could explain how. By morning, the prison was on full lockdown. Helicopters hovered over the facility. News crews gathered at the gates. Reporters shouted questions about a Supermax breach, but the warden refused to comment. Inside, tensions were high. Officers whispered that Razor had help from the inside. That night, Dr. Porter sat alone in her office, replaying the security footage. Every file was blank, except one, a video time-stamped just before the escape. She clicked it open. The feed showed Razor's cell, but there was something wrong. His body was still there, sitting perfectly still. The door was wide open, but he hadn't moved. And then, after several seconds, the Razor in the footage turned his head, slowly, toward the camera. Dr. Porter froze. The real Razor had vanished, yet the one on the screen was still inside. She leaned closer, trembling. "What are you?" she whispered. The image flickered. Razor's voice came through the speakers, soft but clear. "I told you," he said. "Now you see how Pelican Bay really works." The power cut out instantly. Across the facility, alarms blared again. Officers ran toward the control room, where every monitor was flashing the same words, typed across the screen in white letters: "Do not look away." Then, from somewhere deep inside C Block, came a loud crash, like a wall collapsing. "Sir," Miller shouted into his radio, panic in his voice. "It's coming from the lower level. Something's breaking through." The warden grabbed his flashlight. "Get down there now. Nobody moves alone." They rushed toward the lower tier, but as they turned, corner. A cold draft swept past them, air from a tunnel that shouldn't exist. And carved above the opening were 3 simple words: Razor was right. Dust poured from the ceiling as the guards pointed their flashlights into the dark tunnel. The air smelled damp and metallic, like wet concrete mixed with rust. "What is this place?" Miller whispered. The warden didn't answer. The tunnel stretched deep under Pelican Bay, some kind of maintenance shaft, but older, rougher, almost like it had been dug by hand decades ago. "Stay sharp," the warden ordered. "No one goes in alone." They moved slowly, flashlights trembling. The further they went, the colder it got. Strange marks covered the walls, lines, circles, symbols that looked almost mathematical. Miller ran his hand across one and froze. The marks weren't painted. They were burned into the concrete. Suddenly, a faint voice echoed from ahead. "Help, please." Everyone froze. It was faint but clear, a man's voice. "Daniels?" Miller called out. "That you?" The voice didn't answer, but they could hear breathing. The sound came from behind a metal grate at the end of the tunnel. Miller shined his light through it and nearly dropped it. Behind the bars was Officer Daniels, the man they'd already sent to the infirmary. His uniform was shredded, his eyes wide. He pressed his face against the grate and whispered, "You shouldn't have come down here." Miller stepped back. "What do you mean? We saw you upstairs." Daniels shook his head slowly. "That wasn't me." The warden ordered the team to break the grate, but before they could, the lights flickered again, then went out. Complete darkness. Someone screamed. There was a scuffling sound, boots scraping, radios crackling. When the lights came back on, one of the guards was gone. "Everyone back to the surface," the warden shouted. But when they turned around, the way they came had vanished. The tunnel wall was now solid, smooth concrete. No exit, no crack, nothing. Miller's voice shook. "That's impossible. We just came through. Here." The warden clenched his jaw. "Keep moving forward." They continued deeper until they reached a wide chamber, round with metal pipes running along the ceiling. In the middle of the floor was a large hatch, sealed shut with heavy bolts. On it were the same words Razor had scratched on his wall. "Now you see how Pelican Bay really works." The warden knelt, shining his light on the hatch. "This isn't on any blueprint," he muttered. Suddenly the hatch rattled. Something underneath pounded once, twice, then stopped. "Step back," Miller yelled, but the bolts began to twist open by themselves, one by one, the sound echoing through the chamber. The lid slowly lifted, releasing a cold gust of air that smelled like old metal and burnt wires. From inside the hatch, a voice spoke. It was Razor's voice. Calm, steady. "You think this place holds us," it said, "but it's been feeding on us." The warden stepped forward, shaking. "Razor, where are you?" "I told you," the voice replied, echoing all around them. "Pelican Bay isn't a prison. It's a machine." The lights flickered again, and every flashlight shut off at once. In the darkness, the sound of footsteps came from all sides. Heavy, slow, and not just one person. Dozens of them, circling. Miller grabbed for his radio, whispering, "Control, this is C-Block team. We need—" A whisper cut through his transmission. "No one leaves." Then the radio exploded in sparks. The warden turned to yell for his men, but they were gone, every single one. The tunnel was empty. He stood alone in the chamber, staring at the open hatch. From deep below, a faint glow began to rise, white at first, then red. And in that light, he saw Razor Cortez standing at the bottom of the shaft, looking up at him, smiling like he'd been waiting all along. "Welcome to the real Pelican Bay," Razor said softly. The warden took a step back, his heart pounding. "What are you doing down there?" Razor raised his hand and pointed upward. "Finishing what they started." The ground trembled violently. The walls cracked. And then, from deep beneath the prison, came a rumbling sound that grew louder and louder, like something waking up after years of silence. The warden turned to run, but the tunnel began collapsing behind him. And as the chamber filled with light, a final scream echoed through the radio system, reaching every speaker across Pelican Bay. "It's not a prison anymore!" The ground shook so hard that even the towers above Pelican Bay rattled. Sirens wailed as guards scrambled across the yard, shouting over the noise. Dust burst from the vents. The prison's floodlights flickered, then went black. For a full minute, no one could see anything. Just the echo of alarms and terrified voices. Deep underground, the warden stumbled through the collapsing tunnel, coughing as smoke and dust filled the air. "Razor!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. What did you do? From behind him came that calm, steady voice. You kept us caged for years. Now the cage wakes. A sudden blast of air whooshed up from the open hatch. The glowing red light inside was brighter now, pulsing like a heartbeat. Strange humming sounds filled the chamber, low, mechanical, almost alive. The burned symbols on the walls began to glow. Miller, limping and covered in dust, appeared beside the warden, eyes wide in fear. "We have to shut it down," he gasped. The warden nodded, running toward a control panel near the wall. He flipped switches, but nothing responded. The power lines had been cut. Sparks flew, and the humming grew louder, deeper, like 1,000 voices whispering at once. Then they saw him. Razor Cortez climbed up from the hatch, calm and untouched by the chaos. His prison uniform was torn, but his face was expressionless, his eyes reflecting the red light. Behind him, shapes moved in the shadows, faces, hundreds of them, faint and glowing, like the souls of everyone who had ever vanished inside Pelican Bay. "You don't understand," Razor said softly. "This place was never built just to hold men. It was built to study them, to use them, and when it learned enough..." He looked around slowly. It woke up. The warden stared, trembling. "You're insane." Razor smiled faintly. "Am I? Look around you." The walls began to shift, metal panels sliding open to reveal wires and machines pulsing with light. The prison itself was alive, breathing, moving, humming. Miller grabbed the warden's arm. "We have to get out now." They turned to run, but the tunnel behind them sealed shut again, a solid wall of concrete. Trapped. The humming turned into a roar. Lights burst overhead. Razor stood perfectly still, watching them. "It's too late," he said. "Pelican Bay doesn't let go of its own." The ground split beneath their feet. The warden lost his balance and fell, grabbing the edge of the metal hatch. Miller tried to pull him up, but the floor gave way completely. Both men plunged into the red light below as Razor stared down, unblinking. The light swallowed everything, then faded, leaving only silence. Hours later, rescue teams found the prison quiet again. No signs of damage, no signs of an escape. Every system was back online. The cameras all worked perfectly. But when the technicians reviewed the last few minutes of footage, they saw something chilling. One of the control room monitors showed a live feed of the empty chamber. And in that chamber, standing alone beside the sealed hatch, was Razor Cortez. He looked directly at the camera and whispered one last time, "Now you finally see how Pelican Bay really works." Then the feed cut to static,